Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sutta in the City. It's Thursday night, and I'm here in New York City, and Stephen, Westchester County.
Sort of New York City.
It's sort of like New York light. It's okay. We're not gonna down Stephen for that. But we want to welcome you all here tonight. It's great to have you here. It's always good to see you. Um, the familiar faces and the new faces. So welcome. Um,
Is this where I
Stephen,
have to make my true confession moment?
yeah, you guys, Stephen has a confession for you.
I
Stephen,
have.
don't make it too heavy. It's really just like okay.
The confession is that I skipped the sutta in my mind, prepared the subsequent sutta, and wrote a mass mailing about that. But in fact, we're not doing that sutta. But we are doing that sutta on Sunday. So consider it a preview. But today we're not doing Archer, we're doing Childless because that's the next one in our collection. So no big deal. But the poem, sort of maybe of today, is a bit more Archer based, but it's still
Yeah,
a great poem.
yeah, the poem's a bit skewed, but it's okay. We can swing with it. Um, it's also kind of long, but Stephen was really into it.
It's not
So
that long.
okay. All right, everyone, let's give it up for Stephen. He's reading, and I actually really love Elizabeth Bishop. So go for it, Stephen.
You know, one interesting thing about Elizabeth Bishop is she did not have children. She was
So
childless.
well,
But
so then
that's irrelevant.
no, it's not irrelevant, Stephen. It relates to our sutta for the evening, child morning or evening, childless. Okay, so
Yes.
you just made it.
And so, anyway, Elizabeth Bishop, great American poet, died in the 1970s, I believe, went to Vassar College, and then was living in New York City during the Great Depression of America, a time of great hardship, a time where there were bread lines and people had to wait for, handouts, so to speak. And so this poem is about that. It also has a strange sort of biblical loaves and fishes miracle aspect to it. And what I find super interesting about this poem, which perhaps not many will, but I'm a nerdy person, is that it's written in a very formal structure called a sestina, which means that it consists of six groups of six lines, and the final word of each of the six of the lines are repeated over and over again. So we have in our first stanza coffee, crumb, balcony, miracle, sun, and river. And each subsequent stanza has the same set of words, but they have to be presented in a separate or different order each time, never the same. And then there's a three-line finale to this poem, which technically is called the envoy, which means something like the send-off, where the six words have to be all incorporated within the body of the text. So we have, on the one hand, this very formal, tight structure to this poem, which I think Miss Bishop was very fond of. Yet it seems somewhat improvisatory at the same time. So I find that interesting. A miracle for breakfast. At 6 o'clock, we were waiting for coffee and the charitable crumb that was going to be served from a certain balcony, like kings of old, or like a miracle. It was still dark. One foot of the sun steadied itself on a long ripple in the river. The first ferry of the day had just crossed the river. It was so cold, we hoped that the coffee would be very hot, seeing that the sun was not going to warm us, and that the crumb would be a loaf each, buttered by a miracle. At 7, a man stepped out on the balcony. He stood for a minute alone on the balcony, looking over our heads towards the river. A servant handed him the makings of a miracle, consisting of one lone cup of coffee and one roll, which he proceeded to crumb, his head, so to speak, in the clouds along with the sun. Was the man crazy? What under the sun was he trying to do up there on his balcony? Each man received one rather hard crumb, which some flicked scornfully into the river, and in a cup, one drop of the coffee. Some of us stood around, waiting for the miracle. I can tell what I saw next. It was not a miracle. A beautiful villa stood in the sun, and from its doors came the smell of hot coffee. In front, a Baroque white plaster balcony added by birds who nest along the river. I saw it with one eye close to the crumb, and galleries and marble chambers. My crumb, my mansion, made for me by a miracle, through ages, by insects, birds, and the river working the stone. Each day in the sun at breakfast time, I sit on my balcony with my feet up and drink gallons of coffee. We licked up the crumb and swallowed the coffee. A window across the river caught the sun as if the miracle were working on the wrong balcony.
So, Stephen, why did you pick this particular poem?
Well, I think it has to do with the idea of somebody giving another person alms. And of course, expectations not being met. But unfortunately, our sutta today is not about almsgiving. That's going to be on Sunday. So we'll have to talk about it more then.
It's not about almsgiving, but it is about giving and proper giving and how one should give. So I think in its own way, it's appropriate. So why don't we start our sutta for the evening? We'll need 4 readers. So each reader will read 2 paragraphs, and the last one will get to read these 2 poetic stanzas. So please raise your blue hand if you would like to read. And we can start with Sue-Ann. Sue-Ann, did you want to read it all tonight? Okay, not hearing. So we'll start with Brahman Levy. Thank you so much for volunteering.
No problem. So start at childless. At Savatthi, then King Pasenadi of Kosala approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, and sat down to one side. The Blessed One then said to him, "Where are you coming from, great king, in the middle of the day?" "Here, venerable sir, a financier householder in Savatthi has died. I have come after conveying his heirless fortune to the palace as he died intestate. There were 80 lakhs of gold, not to speak of silver. And yet, venerable sir, that financier householder's meals were like this. He ate red rice along with sour gruel. His clothes were like this. He wore a 3-piece hempen garment. His vehicle was like this. He went about in a dilapidated little cart with a leaf awning."
Thank you so much.
So it is.
Oh.
Jealous, okay.
Thank you so much, Brahman.
I'll read.
Okay, go ahead, Sue-Ann.
So it is, great king. So it is, great king. When an inferior man gains abundant wealth, he does not make himself happy and pleased, nor does he make his mother and father happy and pleased, nor his wife and children, nor his slaves, workers, and servants, nor his friends and colleagues, nor does he establish an offering for ascetics and Brahmins, one leading upwards of heavenly fruit, resulting in happiness, conducive to heaven. Because his wealth is not being used properly, kings take it away, or thieves take it away, or fire burns it, or water carries it away, or unloved heirs take it. Such being the case, great king, that wealth not being used properly goes to waste, not to utilization. Suppose, great king, in uninhabited by human beings, there was a lotus pond with clear, cool, sweet, clean water, with good fronds, delightful, but no people would take that water, or drink it, or bathe in it, or use it for any purpose. In such a case, great king, that water, not being used properly, should go to waste, not to utilization. So too, great king, when an inferior man gains abundant wealth, that wealth, not being used properly, goes to waste, not to utilization.
Thank you. Ken?
But, great king, when a superior man gains abundant wealth, he makes himself happy and pleased, and he makes his mother and father happy and pleased, and his wife and children, and his slaves, workers and servants, and his friends and colleagues. And he establishes an offering for ascetics and Brahmins, one leading upwards of heavenly fruit, resulting in happiness conducive to heaven. Because his wealth is being used properly, kings do not take it away. Thieves do not take it away. Fire does not burn it, water does not carry it away, and unloved heirs do not take it. Such being the case, great king, that wealth being used properly goes to utilization, not to waste. Suppose, great king, not far from a village or town, there was a lotus pond with clear, cool, sweet, clean water, with good fords, delightful, and people would take that water and drink it and bathe in it and use it for their purposes. In such a case, great king, that water being used properly would go to utilization, not to waste. And so, great king, when a superior man gains abundant wealth, that wealth being used properly goes to utilization, not to waste.
Thank you, King. King. Ken, so sorry. You've been promoted.
Regina, why don't you read the verses?
Well, I was going to see if Ayavimala wanted to try.
Okay.
Ayavimala? Great.
As cool water in a desolate place evaporates without being drunk, so when a scoundrel acquires wealth, he neither enjoys himself nor gives. But when the wise man obtains wealth, he enjoys himself and does his duty. Having supported his kin, free from blame, that noble man goes to a heavenly state.
Thank you so much, Vimala, and to all of our readers. Always appreciated. Well, it's really interesting. I know somehow a lot of people have somehow gotten the idea that wealth is a bad thing and we shouldn't aspire to have money, but it seems to me that the Buddha is not saying that here, is he? As a matter of fact, he's giving us ideas of how we should spend wealth and what our wealth, whatever level it's at, how it should be spent. And I find this quite interesting that we're not to live in hair shirts and poverty. And in fact, the Buddha rather looks down upon this. It reminds me of when speaking of metta, it said that when one offers loving kindness, it should come from a place of abundance. When one offers anything, it should come from a place of abundance. And what does that mean? It's when I offer you something, I'm not still holding on to it and tugging it and wanting to keep some of it for myself, right? It's if I have a lot of something, then giving is free and easy and not something that's going to be hurtful to me because I still have a lot to give. And it sounds like that's what the Buddha is saying here, that it's about giving with happiness, giving with kindness, and giving to those who can appreciate being given to. So we have two people here. And what do we have? We have the inferior type of individual and the superior type of individual. And what does the inferior person do with their wealth, Stephen?
Not much. He is a miser. He keeps it all in the bank. Not even for himself, it seems like. He doesn't even lavish it solely upon himself, but rather lives like a very poor person. I guess he kind of keeps it all somewhere locked away. Perhaps there's a room stacked with coins, and no one gets it. And in fact, he didn't even, after his death, will it away. It was just kind of left there and said, intest it, kind of just abandoned. And even he couldn't even let go of it at death, couldn't face the parting of it. And so that's definitely seeming like a bad choice.
So a bad choice. And look at this, his car, it's just got like this leaf awning. Come on now.
That's worse than a convertible.
It is. It's really, really bad.
That's like a Fred Flintstone vehicle.
It is.
That's right. It probably has stone wheels.
It's dilapidated. We know that. But when we look at this, when I read this sutta, I was thinking, when he's speaking about the wealth not being used properly, kings take it away. Well, nowadays we have the tax man, right? Wherever we live, we have that. And when you die intestate, honestly, it's kind of an awful thing to do, I think, to family and to organizations even that could really use that largesse, if you will, rather than giving it to Uncle Sam or whatever country you live in, just giving it to the tax man. And this, when I read this, or fire burns it. So you guys, I tried to do some research. I couldn't find it before this session, but I was watching this documentary about this country western singer here in the United States, who was really very talented, very not so well educated. He probably went to like the 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade. So not a highly educated. He lived in the country somewhere, but he was an incredible writer of country western songs. And from this, he made a tremendous amount of money. And because he lived during the Depression, he didn't trust his money to banks. And so what he did was he took all of his royalties from his songwriting in cash, and he hid it behind the walls in his house, which I believe was just like a very simple, modest, practically a one-room house. And he did have a wife, but they spent almost nothing. And sad but true, one day, his house burned down, and with it, all the money inside of it. And when you think about money, it's a thing, right? It's not a value in and of itself, but it's what can be done with that money. Scholarships for students, supporting monastics, anything. But to be burned and not used, it's a tragedy for him, but it's a great tragedy for what could have been. And there's so many examples like this, aren't there?
Yeah, definitely. But what I find interesting is that not only does the Buddha, say that the miserly person is not a very good person, but he also seems to be equating the act of generosity with not just benefiting the recipient, but also the giver. Mm. And I think that might not always, at least in the West, cross the minds of us, that by giving something away, we're not only benefiting the recipient, but in fact, we're benefiting ourselves. And clearly, the miserly person just doesn't see it this way, because he would think, well, I give all this stuff away, but I'm getting something back. I'm getting something, but he doesn't see it that way. But what the Buddha teaches is that the act of generosity has great benefit for the giver as well as the receiver. And I think this was even for me somewhat of a novel idea when I heard it. It sort of maybe didn't occur to me right away. I mean, we're not talking about the person who puts their name on a concert hall and because they donated $5 million, and then their benefit is that everyone has has to read their name as they enter the building. We're almost talking about something perhaps a little more metaphysical.
Right. Well, like it says right here, nor does he establish an offering for ascetics and Brahmins, one leading upwards of heavenly fruit, resulting in happiness conducive to heaven. So that type of gift reflects back onto the giver. And then, of course, this points to sila and the importance of sila in our Buddhist practice. So it has been told that before the Buddha taught any of his teachings, one of the first things he taught was, I'm sorry, I meant to say dana, not sila. One of the first things that he taught was dana and the importance of dana, which I think is probably more easily taught in other countries maybe than in ours. And, we have people from different places in the world here. And to our friends in Malaysia and other parts of Asia, I will just share with you that our teachers here in the United States, when they tell us about dana, they talk about their trips to Asia to do their Buddhist studies or to meditate with meditation masters. And they tell us about how dana is so much more practiced in Asia. And I'm wondering if any of y'all would like to share if that has been your experience and how you see it in your lives. It's something kind of foreign to us.
Maybe one thing I will say, as maybe somebody's getting ready to answer, is that the Buddha is often said to have taught the gradual path. He didn't just dump people into the deep end of Buddhism, so to speak. And the first things that always come up, the first things he talked about were dana and sila and sagga, heaven. And so before he kind of launched into this kind of what might be thought of as sort of heady intellectual exposition of the Noble Eightfold Path and all that, he really stressed primarily at first the virtues of giving and virtue, and then about benefits in this life and the hereafter. And so I think this is sometimes sort of a little bit skipped over in the West, in my experience. We sort of want to jump right to the chase. We want to know about the 5 and the 8s and, how do I sit on the cushion? But I just would be curious to hear from anyone who'd like to share about their experience, their Buddhist experience from the East.
Yeah, we really want to hear from you. Allison? Allison, you had your hand raised.
Yes, I'd like to share something. I noticed that two major differences is that one is in the West is influenced by Christianity. So you emphasize giving is giving to the poor and disadvantaged people. And in this sutra, Buddha talks about everybody, but not talking about they are unrelated people. So I noticed that in the East, people are very generous, particularly for dana for the Brahmins and monks, stuff like that. But they are almost indifferent towards the people who are poor or disadvantaged. So I noticed that in temple or in this temple monastery organization, they get a lot of donations, but in terms of helping disadvantaged people, poor people, I think unrelated to them, nothing they can connect it to. It's much harder for them to open their heart and contribute. That's what I noticed, but I am biased anyway. So this is just my personal experience. And so I like to see how can we make this gap. And that's what I really liked about, I'm not doing the commercial. I really liked about Buddhist Global Relief.
Yes. Right. Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Allison, very much for that. It's a fascinating point, and it's a point that I think will come to even stronger in the next sutta, because it then talks very specifically, there's an idea that the Buddha talks about, which is that the amount of benefit one receives from giving is directly proportional to the virtue of the recipient. In other words, in a sort of cosmic way, perhaps, the giving to an animal would yield less merit than giving to a monastic. That there's somehow this idea of an equation, perhaps. And I think that this might be, in part at least, an answer to why you've experienced this. You're seeing this in Asia, because unfortunately what happens is that one thinks, well, if I give something to a monastic, I will then perhaps receive more benefit than if I give somebody just randomly on the street. And it's a complicated idea, and it's an idea that I struggle with a lot too. I find it difficult to wrap my head around.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for mentioning Buddhist Global Relief, because we love BGR. It's okay to do a commercial for them. We both love BGR and Bhikkhu Bodhi. Ken, oh wait, Anfang and then Ken.
Hi everyone, I just wonder if I can share an experience with my grandma and how she really.
I think that she's frozen.
I think so too.
Hmm.
Okay, Anfang, when you unfreeze, we want you to share with us.
To her.
Oh, there she is.
She's
okay.
coming back.
She's back.
Oh.
You had frozen.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, where was I?
You're
Well,
talking about.
I think your internet connection is a little bit unstable. So maybe if you could just tell us quickly before you freeze again.
Okay, I just want to share a story about my grandma, a devoted Buddhist. She wanted to donate a lot of her wealth to the monastic in Vietnam. But interesting enough, she told me that the monk told her not to do that because the monk say the monastic in Vietnam is very corrupted. And he actually advised her to use her wealth for the children, for the people who in need, rather than donate it to the monk and the monastery. And from that, she kind of like awakened because she really devoted. And from that point on, she used the wealth for the people who sick and actually buy food and donate it. So, and she always taught me that one way of being generous is just not by donating, but not refuse, but don't take anything from anyone. Even they offer you and you see that they are not as wealthy, don't take it. Even you kind of are entitled to take it, but just refuse and give as much as you can. So it's interesting that how, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's hard to hear these things, isn't it? But it is, the Buddha does say it's not just to monastics, but to, those who are virtuous monastics. So it sounds like your grandmother got good advice. Thank you for sharing. I believe, Ken, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was picking up on Stephen kept talking about benefit, but the word I noticed I didn't see in this sutta was merit, because that's the typical benefit that the monks would give in return or provide in return was merit. And there's actually been a number of academic papers about the whole economy of dana and punya in Asian countries. So maybe we'll get into the merit in the next one, but I found it interesting that that word did not occur in this sutta.
I don't think the word occurs in the next sutta. I think the word that occurs both here and next is the fruits of one's giving that one will, the donor will receive. And in some suttas, it's actually pretty sort of clearly laid out, all the way from animal to arahant, the amount of sort of merit that one can reap by giving. But I don't think the word merit here will occur. But it's an interesting question and point. Thank you. Annie?
I'm from Singapore. So I think one thing is merit making is emphasized. Not really emphasized, but people are very aware of merit making. So so when famous monastics come, there's tendency to a lot of people give. But the other thing that we are concerned about is that we also want to support the monastics so that we can support what we call the sasana, the continuation of this tradition. So in a sense, it's very important to focus on those so-called virtuous ones, and but we have to make an investigation. We are supposed to make an investigation, but I noticed that some people tend to go for certain monks when actually we were taught that when we offer to the Mahasangha, or when we offer, we must not offer with this thought of looking after this particular monk, but in looking after this particular monk, we are looking after the whole so-called the Sangha to support the continuation of this tradition. So in that sense, it is very important. And I heard that Thai people or Sri Lankan people, the first thing they do is dana. They make sure that they have some rice at home, and when there are monastics around, that they can give. And being able to give is also very important, because whether you're rich or poor, in fact, rich people can give a lot. So, but for poor people, it's very important for them to be able to give. So if somebody is poorer than you and want to give you, if it's sincere, I think it's also, okay, that's just another point of view. It may be actually good for that person to give you, because that person feels good about it. And in fact, it's very, very poor villagers in those Buddhist countries, traditional Buddhist countries, they give when they're very poor. They may just give, like I heard Ajahn Brahm get a little frog that they were able to catch, a little baby frog or something on top of his rice, and he had to eat it. It was so gross, but I think for them, it beautifies their mind. It makes them feel happy for them to start the day. And it also is a kind of faith. So there's pros and cons. There's also this idea of merit making and, not thinking about the poor. But sometimes poor people also need to be able to give. And I also heard that the Dalai Lama also accepted like things seem ridiculous, like even a skirt from somebody who's very poor. So it is a culture in Asia, and maybe we must think in terms of people also needing to give, because when they make the merit, they beautify their mind, and then they can practice, and they also but I don't know, I don't really know much lah, but that is my take on it. Thank you.
Thank
you
you.
much. Thank you so much for sharing. And I do think that receiving is also a form of generosity. I definitely understand what you were saying, Anfang, too. And I understand what you were saying, Annie. I'll just give an example. I have a friend. We seem to get laid off of jobs if I have a job, she's laid off. If she's laid off, I have a job. So when I'm laid off, she's generous to me. She takes me out to dinner. We'll get a pizza. She won't let me pay. But now when she's laid off and I want to pay for the pizza, she won't let me. And that's something that I've said, please, why won't you let me? It's not nice. It doesn't feel good for me. I want to, and it kind of feels like a rejection. So I agree. It's important to be careful and make sure that people aren't giving too much. And on the other hand, I think there is something to be said for accepting graciously other people's gifts. So it is an interesting perspective. And I think the point it's good, and I'm so glad that we have this international crowd so that we can hear all of these stories. I think what the Buddha is, well, what he's definitely saying here is be generous. Be generous to those you love. Be generous to those who, support the Sangha, as you were saying, Annie. I'm wondering if our one venerable online tonight might have some thoughts regarding the sutta.
But may I just interject one thing before we hear
Sure.
from Aya, which I'd love to. I've been looking at another sutta. I hope Regina's not mad at me for this. But I found it very helpful, and I just want to read a sentence from it. This is from Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Threes, number 57. It's called Vacha. And he says, those, Vacha, who say, the ascetic Gautama says, alms should be given only to me, or only what is given to my disciples is very fruitful, not what is given to the disciples of others. They do not state what has been said by me, but misrepresent me with what is untrue and contrary to fact. And so here the Buddha is very clearly saying you should not only give to Buddhists and you should not only give to monastics, but one gets great benefit from giving to anybody or anything. And in fact, he follows up by saying, Vacha, I say that one acquires merit even if one throws away dishwashing water in a refuse dump or cesspit with the thought, may the living beings here sustain themselves with this. And I found that actually very moving, because it's the act of giving is very much about the mindset of the giver. It's not only about the lavishness of the gift, it's about the sincerity and kindness of the donor.
Well, I can say when I put my food scraps in the compost, which New York City doesn't do right now because of COVID, but I do. I always think, gee, I hope that the little bugs and worms and stuff that are going to eat these food scraps enjoy it. I kind of miss doing composting.
Weren't you giving food to rats in the subway?
Actually, I was, but that's supposed to be our secret, Stephen. Come on.
Okay, sorry.
Gosh, people might get mad at me for feeding the subway rats. But anyway, Aya Vimala.
I just wanted, I would say, I know sometimes people will come to our temple and still do, and they would not have anything. And I remember one person, he didn't have any money, and he would always bring some little thing, maybe just it'd be a tiny thing, or it might be a small food item, and he would come in and he'd hand it to me, and that was his dana. And I always, I felt, and the other monks felt, that was really valuable, just because his intention was always to, not to be a guest without anything to give. And it was so meaningful. And it might just be a little figurine, or a little, maybe some crackers in a little package or something. But that was really a gift, that the intention was there. So but I don't like it when temples charge for the dana, for the dhamma, not the dana. When there's a charge for the teachings, that's hard for me. When it's kind of a direct, if you want to come to the event, this is what you pay. I have trouble seeing that, and I understand there are lots of arguments like, well, we have to pay for the rent and we have to pay for the electricity, but that troubles me. The dana that people give, I think Westerners are not taught to be as generous as a lot of people from Buddhist countries are. But I don't like to see that. It's not greediness, but I don't like when we have to ask for money for the Dhamma.
Right. Agreed. And in
Yeah.
many ways, it cheapens the Dhamma because, you know, as the Buddha said, the Dhamma is priceless.
Right.
And just to add, what is it that liberates us? It is freedom from clinging, right? And what is it that we practice when we give? We practice non-clinging. So it really is a beautiful practice to integrate in our lives. And I do wish that we in the West had more of this in our culture. It's definitely something that we're missing, very much so.
It would be great if it was actually taught in schools. I think Venerable Bodhi has talked about how it would be wonderful if these sort of ethical questions were given sort of a subject in school for children, not just mathematics and writing, but sort of what might be called ethical living could be of great benefit for everybody, for the students and the teachers. And maybe I'll just point out one more thing, that in the Metta Sutta, which we talk about a lot, the practice of metta, the whole first half of the sutta, in fact, if you look at it or if you think about it, is all about how one should conduct oneself. It's really all about sila and dana. It's all about being a good person before you even sort of do the, quote, formal metta practice. You have to sort of establish yourself as a good person, sort of in public. And then you're ready to sort of do metta.
Well, I can't resist that segue. So I think we should do some metta. What do you think, guys? Let's just do this for a minute or two and we can absorb the merit of our great coming together and discussing Dhamma. So if you're able to, find yourself just comfortably seated and breathe in a sense of gratitude for studying the Dhamma with good friends from around the world. I feel such a sense of gratitude. I mean, it's unfortunate the circumstances that brought it together, but the fact that we are together virtually, and it feels so caring and so real. So let's just breathe in a sense of collective gratitude for each other and for the Dhamma. And as we breathe in that gratitude, let's concentrate on a sense of loving kindness for ourselves and everyone in this class. And we wish that we, as well as everyone in this Zoom session together, can be happy and healthy and achieve all their highest aspirations. And we feel the goodness that comes from wishing well to others. And we see that loving kindness stretch from New York City to Malaysia to Vietnam to Thailand, skipping over several continents back to California, through to Illinois, north, through to Canada, south, all the way down to South America. We wish that ourselves, our study mates, and all living beings in all directions of the world may be happy, healthy, and attain their highest aspirations. And we wish this for the birds in the sky and all living beings in the oceans. And we also remember all the living beings that are in the earth that we stand on. So every single one, without exception, may they all be happy. May they all be healthy. May they live with ease. And may they have the circumstances to attain their highest aspirations. We wish this from the deepest center of our hearts. We wish that it may be so. So thank you all. Thank you all for spending this evening with us or this morning with us. And we look forward to seeing you again here at Sutta and the City. And we hope that this teaching of generosity will carry you throughout the day. And so thank you so much. Thank
And
you all.
maybe before we
Thank
stop,
you.
may I quickly say that Sunday we will do the sutta that was advertised for today through my error. So if you receive a mail about Sunday that looks a lot like the mail you got for today, don't be confused. It's only my confusion. It's not your confusion. And then also we're going to announce that we will be finishing this set of readings from the Kosala Samyutta on Sunday. There's a sort of a quick postscript. Take a look at that too. And then I think Regina and I will take a week off to regroup and find some amazing new texts to read, and then we'll be back.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you, one and
you.
all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody,
Namaste.
take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for your generosity, Regina and Stephen.
Oh, thank you so much, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you
most
so much.
welcome.